What I said to Harry, I said, you know, two things. The one thing I would caution you, keep in mind, and you know, I know it's not partisan, but keep in mind, at the end of the day, it's votes in the General Assembly, and the leaders, you know, the members of the General Assembly here know what I mean. It's the votes that determine the leadership. The leadership, you know, has got the goodies. So it's important to remember that not only do we need people that agree with us, but we need people that we can figure out, and I'm going to be gone. But the next governor and teams need to figure out how you get a caucus built together that can create and vote for the next leadership that is going to be following the same principles that you're talking about. That's key. That's key. Because as they know, you know, the members of the Senate and the House that are here, it's the votes in there for the leader and the leadership that matter. But I said to Harry, I said, I would ask anybody you're going to support four principles that, you know, English call the contract of merit, let's call it the compact for Rhode Island, something that we know are going to move the state forward. Now, four things that I would say you need to get a commitment on is, first of all, that you've got to continue to reduce the size of government. We cannot afford, you've heard me say, all the focus has been on the state government, and we've been shrinking that with down fewer employees than anybody can remember. But more money is spent by the 39 cities and towns than is spent by the state. $5 billion is spent to support government in the state. 2 of that is actually for programs the state actually manages and runs. 3 of it, $3 billion of the 5 is actually expenditure at the 39 cities and towns. So obviously, you cannot sustain government going forward just on trying to shrink the 2. You've got to find ways to shrink the 3. And it can be done. I'm not going to spend time on a whole host of things that we put in the budget. But you need a commitment from people that are running that understands that. And is willing to say, yes, we've got to give the cities and towns help in terms of tools so that they can find ways to reduce their costs and reduce their burden on all of us as taxpayers. That's one. 2, eminently tied to that is the whole issue of public sector pensions and benefits. What I talked about earlier. That is a key. Most of the money spent, particularly by the 39 cities and towns, by the way. There's a lot of state's money spent in grants going out to human service programs and providers in the community. But most of the spending by the 39 cities and towns is wages and benefits and pensions. That's where it is. And I could spend hours telling you about, and you talk to any of you that are involved in the local board, you know what I mean? So there has to be a concerted effort and a commitment on anybody that's running for the General Assembly that they will fight to make those benefits and pensions comparable to the private sector, the taxpayers, as Jim said, are paying the bill. That's eminently fair and reasonable. Thirdly, we need to improve the climate for business. And Jeff spent enough time on that. The only thing I would add to that is right now there's going to be an assault, I believe, this year in the General Assembly on the tax front. As much as you're hearing no. Because the pressure is huge. And one of the successes we've had is bringing the flat tax option down, because at 9.9%, we're an outlier in the country in terms of the way we tax marginally high-income people. And we're down to 10th. But what you didn't say, Jim, I thought you were going to say, because I use it as a poster child, New Hampshire's unemployment rate, while ours is 12.9 right now, theirs is 7. 7 in New Hampshire. No income tax, no sales tax. So is anybody surprised that people in Massachusetts are moving north rather than south? We're getting some to come finally with the movement down to the flat tax, which this year is going down, this tax year, down to 6. All right? But it's got one more step to go to get down to 5.5. Massachusetts flat tax is at 5.3. It was key in getting Fidelity to bring almost 1,000 people that they're in the process of bringing out of Boston into that new building they built in Smithfield. I know that. I've talked to Ned Johnson. I've talked to the senior people. I know how important that was. And when people say, well, it doesn't look like it's helping. Oh, this is great. We're in the middle of the worst economic downturn since the Depression, and we're wondering whether that tax advantage has had an impact? Come on. I know it has. So you need to get a commitment from whoever is running that they understand that we've got to be tax competitive. Yes, regulatory. We've got a whole bunch of things you're going to hear about in the next 2 weeks before the end of the month, into March, on all the things that we have done and we're rolling out with support from the legislature on the regulatory side. That's the third. Last thing is we've got to sustain what Frank Gallo started. We're not going to succeed as a state leaving behind a whole group of our youngsters. And I know, listen, I taught, Sue taught, I know how tough it is, and I know the circumstances many of these youngsters are coming from and what that means in the classroom. But you can't say, well, I can't do anything about it. Because those young people have to have a job and be able to support them like themselves like everyone else. So we got to continue, and I would look for that fourth commitment from whatever, that we've got to sustain the kind of education reform that's begun. We're setting a model for the rest of the nation right now on a lot of different fronts. That's key. So those four things, pretty simple. I would say if anybody wants your support and your money, they sign a compact or whatever for Rhode Island's future that at least embeds those four things. We do that, frankly, and I think we got a real opportunity. The winds of change are like building up not to a gale. All right? They're building up to a hurricane. Not this summer while I'm still here, please. I think it's the only thing we haven't had since I've been governor, all right? So keep, that's plastic. I don't know if I'm not good. But, you know, the winds of change are blowing hugely. Because I'll finish one. Rhode Island is the canary in the coal mine for what is the direction that people fear the nation is headed right now. We're the canary in the coal mine. You want to see what happens when labor unions are controlling everything? You want to see what happens when your spending can't be sustained? You want to see what happens when you build in programs and things you can't possibly afford, but kid yourself? That's what Rhode Island has been doing for 30 years. 30 years. That's what I've been trying to pull back. Why? Because we got to put ourselves, like all of you, every household, every business I know is trying to reduce their costs, control their costs, and survive. Survive. They have every right to expect their government to do the same thing. There's a whole disconnect because what they see going on in Washington right now is like, how do you do this? Wait a minute, let me see, I understand this. We're broke, the economy's in the tank, but we can spend money and borrow money like there's no tomorrow. You know, most people understand. That can't work. That can't work. So, anyway, I think we got a huge opportunity. RISC can be and will be hugely important in making that happen. And I want to do everything I can, because I've spent 7 years, I'm 7.5 years. I don't want to see the progress that we made slide back. I think we're at an axiom time in our state where we've got an opportunity really to set a different direction. And really, I think people understand it. They're beginning to understand it because of things that John are doing and others. They're beginning to understand. That's what goes on in the four walls of that building and the policies that are enacted there, that at the end of the day, no matter who's governor is most important, it needs to be a unified effort. We do that with the support, and you're all out there active, we're going to have a better state that we can all be proud of. So thank you very much.